Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of Non-Scripted Ramblings. Thank you for sticking with me. We're in the prequels. I'm a Kendall Richardson. Welcome. Yes, we're in the prequels. We're past the halfway mark of the entire saga leading up to episode 9, so things are getting interesting. I'm going to be talking about episode 2, Attack of the Clones, in this episode of mine. And viewing it from a critical perspective was an experience different to just watching it as a fan and enjoying it, because I do find parts in this film to enjoy. It is fun in certain ways, but it's overall as a film, I can really understand why so many fans dislike it. I really don't blame them for feeling this way, because it's not a great movie, which pains me to say, but it's true. It's very choppy, it's very badly paced, it's slow in parts, the acting is a bit hit and miss for me from a lot of the performers. And just, I don't know, the plot's very convoluted and things are kind of implied rather than explained. I mean, it's hard to find that balance between exposition and, not overdoing it with the exposition. So you want to, explain things to a certain degree that it feels natural and not like, here's a scene of exposition, I'm going to tell you my evil plan kind of scenes, you don't want all of that. But this is just kind of a lot of, I don't know, I feel like a lot of the behind the scenes kind of stuff is a bit, I don't know. So there's a lot of new characters introduced here, and there's a lot of stuff going on and a lot of things we want to know more about. And of course, at this point in time, stories were explored in other medium apart from the main films. There was all the comics, all the novels, all the games that most are now no longer considered canon, since Disney took over Lucasfilm a few years ago now, which is a shame. But nevertheless, this is where we are. Anyway, so Attack of the Clones, for those who, like I said last week with episode 1, Phantom Menace, for those who aren't taking the time to watch the prequels because of reasons, here's a quick recap of the story of episode 2. Basically, it starts with Padmé Amidala, who is now a senator. She's no longer queen. It's 10 years after the events of Phantom Menace, and she is headed to Coruscant for, she's voting on whether or not the Republic should institute an army to defend themselves against the rising separatist movement. And so someone doesn't really want her to vote on that, so someone's trying to kill her. There's numerous assassination attempts against Padmé, which is, really shocking. So the two of the most famous Jedi we know, Obi-Wan Kenobi and Anakin Skywalker, are dispatched to basically be her bodyguards and make sure she doesn't get killed. This then leads to an investigation as to who is behind the assassination, which is headed up by Obi-Wan Kenobi. And he, goes his separate ways from Anakin in this film, and it goes to Kamino, where he follows a lead on, which bounty hunter could be behind this assassination, and then discovers an entire clone army that was ordered by a former Jedi Master, Sifo Dyas was his name, and there is a massive clone army being built for the Republic that nobody knows about, because Sifo Dyas was murdered many years ago at this point. So yes, and then of course there we meet Jango Fett, who is the original of all of the clones, and a young Boba Fett as well, who turns out is technically not Jango Fett's son, but he's just a clone that he's raising as a son, which is pretty interesting backstory for one of the most famous bounty hunters in the Star Wars canon. So yeah, after that, Obi-Wan ends up on Geonosis, which turns out to be the planet where the Separatist movement has kind of based themselves. This Separatist movement is headed by Count Dooku, and he is a former Jedi Master who became disillusioned with the Jedi ways and kind of turned to the dark side and started, heading up this, movement of, all these different planets and systems that were, and that had enough of the Republic's crap, basically. And then they have, the Trade Federation from the Phantom Menace returns, so we get to see all those droids again, and Viceroy Newt Gunray is back. So yeah, that's all happening there. And then meanwhile, while Obi-Wan's off investigating everything, Anakin never leaves Padme's side, and the two of them end up falling in love. Although Anakin was already in love with her right from the very first scene you see him. He's already like, yeah. Well, I think he fell in love with her as a kid, personally, which is fine. But so there's a whole kind of push and shove kind of romance going on because it's forbidden. They can't be in a relationship. She's a politician. He's a Jedi. And he's not allowed to have a relationship, and it's just not gonna work. And so she resists him, and then she ends up giving in, going, I can't get over you. I'm just gonna love you. And they end up getting married at the end of the film. Meanwhile, the Clone Wars begins, and the Separatist movement ends up fighting against the clone army of the Republic, after one Jar Jar Binks gives Supreme Chancellor Palpatine emergency powers in order to officially make this clone army an army of the Republic. So that's how that started. And then the whole thing, of course, is being masterminded by Palpatine, aka Darth Sidious. He's behind the Separatist movement, and he's obviously behind the Republic and the clone army. So yeah, lots of moving parts and moving pieces in this, and new characters being introduced, and old ones coming back, and new actors and everything. There's a lot going on in this movie, but yeah. Anyway, what can I say? Where should I start? Let's start with the good stuff that I really like in this movie. Obi-Wan Kenobi, awesome. Again, Ewan McGregor nails it. He does an even better job in this film, I think, playing a older Obi-Wan who is definitely more of a refined Jedi Master. He's much more Qui-Gon-like. Not fully Qui-Gon, but he's, he has assumed that role, that mentor role for Anakin, who is still a Padawan learner. He's not an official Jedi yet. And yeah, I know, he does a really good job. I just really enjoy his performance. I always have. And it still holds up to this day. And it's just, he's awesome. In every single scene, he's great. What else do I like about this movie? I mean, Christopher Lee's a really good addition as the villain of the piece. Because I think there's only one scene where the Emperor actually shows himself from memory. But Dooku is very much the main antagonist of this story. Christopher Lee does a really wonderful job again. He was great in everything he did, really. And obviously very good at playing villains or anti-heroes. And Dooku comes off as a very complicated kind of character because of the way the conversation, there's a really great scene with him and Obi-Wan, where Obi-Wan's captured and on Geonosis, and Dooku's trying to convince him to join him, which of course he wasn't going to do because that's the way of the dark side, basically, and that's not going to happen. But certain words that Dooku uses, and talking about Qui-Gon Jinn, because Dooku was actually Qui-Gon's master, Jedi master. So there's obviously some, sensitive issues there, sentimentalness with Qui-Gon, but Dooku can't seem to get through to Obi-Wan, of course, in that scene, which is good. But I don't know, I feel like I really wanted more exploration into who Dooku is, his backstory. So there was definitely potential to go a bit deeper with him. But what we got, I really, really liked. It was really good. Another thing I really enjoy in this, I mean, you get more Mace Windu, Samuel L. Jackson being badass. That's great. It's very, very good. And Yoda's really great in this. I feel like the biggest takeaway from this movie was Yoda, considering this was the first time he was originally a completely CGI, computer-generated character. So, yeah, and to see him, the scene at the end with Count Dooku is fantastic. You know, he walks in his cane, with his cane, hobbling along, you know, and then he just, you know, reveals his, well, it doesn't start with the lightsaber stuff, but, you know, they build up to that with, you know, him and Dooku and Yoda basically have a force-off, you know, who's better, who's stronger, who's more powerful, who's more in touch with the Force, and then Dooku's like, well, I guess we're going to have to settle this the old-fashioned way with lightsabers, so, and that's when it really kicks off, and it's just, I remember being, mesmerized as a kid watching that in the cinema, going, oh my god, Yoda is, jumping up and down, twirling around, flipping, it was mind-blowing, and it still kind of is. It's really cool to see because, you know, he's always been talked about as this epic Jedi, you know, one of the greatest, if not the greatest Jedi to ever live, really, and, you know, his powers are very much never rivaled, and we never really got a chance to properly see them on display, especially in the original trilogy, because he's so old by this point, and then of course he dies. You know, but we get little hints and tastes and things are alluded to, but this was the first time that we were really able to see him in action, kicking ass, and it's so good. It holds up. It's a lot of fun. It's very enjoyable. Now, sadly, that's probably where all the good stuff stops for me. Although, actually, one more thing I should mention. One more thing. And this will be a good segue. I really enjoy the music in this. Again, John Williams, the king of film composing, in my opinion. The score that he created for Padme and Anakin's, their love theme, it's really nice. I've always loved it. I remember, you know, being a teenager and watching Attack of the Clones, and it really kind of, it made me really go for the love story. I was invested. It just helps to kind of create this, I don't know, it's very romantic and tragic at the same time, and you just want them to be together and you want them to be happy. I don't know, it's just a really beautiful piece of music that I've always adored, always. It's definitely one of my favorite. It's up there with Duel of the Fates for me. I think it's that good. I really, really like it. So that's good. And then, there are parts of Anakin and Padme's romance that are enjoyable, you know, but for the most part, and this is the segue, no. For the most part, no. Oh boy. So, Hayden Christensen, welcome to the show. Man, now, I'm going to really put this down. Any kind of poor acting in these movies, and in this one in particular, I put it down to George Lucas's script and direction. Hands down. For me, he is mostly to blame, I think, because Natalie Portman, Oscar winner, Academy Award winner, Natalie freaking Portman is off in this movie. She has really good scenes, and she's better, she comes through as better and more natural than Hayden Christensen does, because she is very talented. Not to say that Hayden isn't, but Natalie, you know, had been acting a lot longer than him by this point. So, but that's, yeah. Anyway, but even she, in some scenes, appears a bit wooden, stiff, I don't know, not unsure of herself. Padme is not as good in this film for me as she was in Phantom Menace. I don't know. It's weird, and I really put it down to, you know, George Lucas not being very good at directing these kinds of scenes. For example, this is a good time to mention this. The brief scene where the two of them are having dinner, and Anakin brings up the phrase aggressive negotiations. That whole scene was improv between the two actors, because George Lucas apparently was so unhappy with the dialogue that he'd written himself for that scene, the romantic dialogue. It was not good, so he was like, just improv something. So he came up with the story about aggressive negotiations, and, you know, oh, it's negotiations with a lightsaber, you know. Ha 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 ha, you're so funny, Anakin. Yeah, I mean, it's cute, it's fine, and that little bit does come off as more natural, whereas some of the other stuff is a bit... I remember going as a teenager thinking, and I don't know if this is just teenage angst when I watched this, but, like, I really dug the lines of, like, you know, you're in my very soul tormenting me, that kind of thing. I don't know, maybe there's the emo inside of me too that went for that. Like, I really kind of liked that dialogue when I was younger, but now I'm like Hayden delivers it pretty well, most of it, but some of it is just, it comes off so strong and so intense and very unsettling in parts, like sometimes the way he looks at her. Like, I made a point in my notes that I have here to write down the way Anakin looks at Padme, because there are a couple of scenes where he's like, you know, trying to look at her longingly or lustfully or lovingly, or, you know, something like, well, I don't know, there may not be a word for the look that he was giving her in one of these scenes, but I was just like, what are you doing? You're not coming across as romantic in the slightest to me. It was coming across as, you know, obsessive, stalkerish. Like, it's very intense. And watching it as an, like, you know, adult, you know, years later, through, you know, this critical perspective now, I'm just like, no, it's not great. And the dialogue is very bad in a lot of these scenes. It's very bad, and you don't believe... So the entire problem with this prequel trilogy that a lot of people have is, and me as well, is because it has to follow certain steps. It has to get to certain points and hit certain marks and beats and all of that. And this is one of the things, is that we had to be introduced to this love story of Anakin and Padme, because, you know, we need to have, you know, Luke and Leia being born by the end of this trilogy, so we can set all of that up for the original trilogy. You know, we need to see the rise and the fall of Anakin Skywalker, and obviously the way George Lucas wrote it was that Padme had a huge part of that, although she's never really mentioned at all in the original trilogy. You know, only once or twice is she referred to as just, you know, Luke and Leia's mother. That's about it. But it's just, I don't know, the way he's written it is just, it's just not done well. Like, you could really do it over and do it better. And I think they kind of rushed it too, because it didn't take long. I mean, I'm guessing the film takes place over a couple of months, but it didn't really feel like, due to maybe the bad pacing as well, it didn't feel that Padme went from resisting him to loving him. Like, it happened really quickly for me, and that's how I felt. And the to and froing was not really convincing for me, because, you know, there are really nice scenes of the two of them. I love the scenes with them in the field, like just talking and being cute and stuff, and him playing a trick on her, pretending to be dead, and then, you know, them rolling around in the grass. That's super cute and it's super fun, and I love it. But, like, you can't show that scene and have everything be happy and fine, and then the next scene they're both broody and like, oh, we can't be together, and like, but you're in my soul, Padme, you're tormenting me, Padme, you're tearing me apart, Padme, basically, you know. Yeah, I don't know, I don't buy it, but that's all I've really got to say about that. And then, you know, the sand thing, I don't really want to talk about the sand thing because I honestly don't think it's as bad as everyone says it is. I'm just like, it's, yeah, fine, it's shitty dialogue, whatever. He delivers it okay. Like, it would have been worse if he, like, whinged about it, you know, because he was pretty good at putting on Anakin's whingy side, that's for sure. But some of it was genuinely really good. Hayden Christensen is a fine actor. I just want everyone to know that. He is. But it's just, George Lucas is not good at directing actors and writing scenes, and yeah. Oh, God. Fun facts, though. Hayden Christensen was one of 400 actors that were screen tested for the role of Anakin Skywalker. There are many, many well-known names that were among the 400, and I'm going to read them out for you now, because this would be really interesting. Just as I say each one, just imagine what this would have been like instead. Ryan Philippe, Misha Collins, Paul Walker, Heath Ledger, Colin Hanks, Christian Bale, James Van Der Beek, Joshua Jackson, Chris Klein, Leonardo DiCaprio himself, and the late Jonathan Brandis. All of them screen tested and auditioned for the role of Anakin. And the reason apparently it went to Hayden Christensen is because he and Natalie Portman looked very good on screen together. So I don't know about that. I think he fits. I think Hayden Christensen fits. But it would have been really interesting to see what these other actors would have done with the same dialogue and how things may have turned out. But regardless, we can't really dwell too much on that, can we? Yeah. What else can I talk about? Yeah, I don't know. I mean, the stuff with Jango Fett's cool. I mean, you could take or leave the entire backstory because it doesn't affect anything to do with Boba Fett in the original trilogy. I mean, apparently obviously the Clone Wars TV show goes a bit more into this kind of thing. But it was really cool to kind of have this as Boba Fett's origin, and seeing Tamira Morrison for real playing Jango Fett, like that was really cool. Yeah, and the Camino stuff, the clones, yeah, it's cool. Interesting fact too, I looked up the fact that the Jedi Master, I'm going to say it wrong every time, Sifo Dyas, was a typo in the script. Originally it was supposed to be Sido Dyas, so a really bad alias for Sidious, as in Darth Sidious, because he's, behind the entire thing. But George Lucas apparently really liked the typo, the way Sifo Dyas sounds instead, so they decided to go with that and create a character who was a Jedi Master, who was mysteriously killed and, was working, behind the scenes, not telling anyone, in secret. He was working in secret to create this clone army with the Kaminoans, so the Republic would have an army. But he had no idea what it would lead to. So basically, in one of the I think it was one of the Clone Wars TV episodes, I think, they revealed something about Sifo Dyas and who was responsible for killing him. I could be remembering that wrong, but basically, Dooku killed Sifo Dyas after Darth Sidious told him to. I think basically they took him out, and then decided to take control of the clone army in secret again, and that's when they programmed Order 66 into all of the clones, so that we'll find out next week when I talk about Revenge of the Sith how Order 66 unfolds and changes everything forever. So Jedi Master Cypher Dyas was actually trying to do some good for the Republic by giving them an army, and it actually led to the downfall of the Jedi and the destruction of the Republic, basically. So, good job. Oh god, what else can I talk about here? Yeah, all the clone suits were CGI, none of them were real. A lot of the actors were just, people that worked at ILM, Industrial Light and Magic, and they would have the helmets on, and then in some scenes they would have the shoes on for references, but they'd be in mocap suits during the whole thing, so they never actually built any clone suits for the entire film, which I guess makes sense, and you can kind of tell when you're watching it that it's CG, but yeah. Yeah, interesting, isn't it? Samuel L. Jackson, again, like I said, it's really good to see more of Mace Windu. Really love his performance in this movie. Really cool thing too, I mean, this is well known now, but Mace Windu has a purple lightsaber, and this doesn't happen in any other kind of thing. I mean, I don't know about extended universe, legacy, canon, whatever, the other stuff, or any actual canon besides the films, but he's the only Jedi with a purple lightsaber, because all the Jedi have blue or green, and the Sith have red, obviously. So Samuel L. Jackson asked George Lucas to have a purple lightsaber, and Lucas was resistant to the idea, of course, because of the way he's written the Jedi, but then he ended up giving it to him, obviously, and it looks awesome, and apparently on the hilt of Mace Windu's lightsaber is engraved the words "bad motherfucker," because it's Samuel L. Jackson, and that is just appropriate as all hell for him. So that's really great. What else could I mention? Yeah, I don't know if there's anything else I really want to talk about. Yeah, I mean, well, the reason why Jango Fett became the clone, I didn't know this. This was really interesting. It was revealed in the Star Wars game Star Wars Bounty Hunter, which was a prequel game to this film, that Jango Fett actually killed Count Dooku's apprentice, Komari Vosa, and it was a test to see whether or not he would be the right candidate for the clone. And when, he succeeded in his mission, Dooku was like, well, you can, go to Kamino and you can be the clone, and then that's when Boba Fett was created, because Jango asked to have a son, which is, really, really cool. There's also some really cheesy dialogue with, like, C-3PO in this, during the Geonosis battle scene in the arena. R2-D2's trying to put him back together, and then he utters such things as such a drag, because his head's being dragged along behind R2, and he refers to being he's just beside himself. And then, of course, when R2 drags his head up to C-3PO's body, he's literally beside himself. So, I mean, I like puns, I do, but that's just like, no. That's too cheesy. That's a little too cheesy for me. In terms of Oscar love, the only nomination this film got was visual effects, which is interesting because as good as a lot of it would have been at the time, some of it's aged well, and some of it, again, like Phantom Menace, has not aged well at all. It is so obvious when you're watching this movie where the green screen is. It's, yeah. Anyway, I was going to mention one other thing, and I can't find it on here. It was the first digital film. So the first film of its kind to be actually, it's not shot on actual proper film, like real film. It was all digital. And ironically, also the last film released on VHS, or the last Star Wars film ever put out on VHS, because, you know, that went the way of the dodo not long after, in the early 2000s. So there you go. I think I'm going to wrap it up. I don't really have any more to say about Attack of the Clones. I think I've said enough. It's not a great film. It's an okay film. It advances the plot, it advances the story, but there's a lot of bad script work. There is a lot of bad pacing, but you know, there's still some good stuff in it, and yeah, I don't know. Anyway, so I hope you guys enjoyed watching that. I definitely enjoyed talking about it. It's always fun to actually show to the world that I don't love everything, because a lot of my friends seem to think that I love every single movie that I watch. Not true. I would be a bad critic if that were the case. So thank you so much. Next week I'll be back and reviewing episode 3, Revenge of the Sith, and I cannot wait. That's going to be awesome. Cool. That is it. I've been a Kendall Richardson, and you've just experienced non-scripted ramblings. May the Force be with you.